This is Every Widow Thing. I am so excited to share with you guys the guest for today. Her name is JJ Elliott. She's written a book called There Are No Rules for This. The book was listed on Katie Couric's best summer reading list this past summer. And when I was scrolling through, I found this book, and the story is really what touched me. And I thought, I got to get this book. It's about 3 women who lose their very best friend to suicide and how they deal with the grief and the aftermath of something like that. And it may sound like it's a very depressing book and not an easy read, but JJ, I read it in 3 days. It's honest, it's cathartic, it's funny, it's all the things that Every Widow Thing tries to be. So I'm so happy that you're here and that you made time. Thank you. And this is JJ Elliott, and she's our guest. Yay!
Yay! Thank you guys, and thank you for doing what you do, because it's what I try to do in my book is really show the kind of full picture of grief, and every little nuance and the ups and downs and everything else. So thank you for talking about this so openly.
Absolutely. And well, I just want to dive right in because I didn't know anything about you when I started reading the book. And very quickly, I started thinking, okay, this is fiction, and yet there is a lot of knowledge about grief. This grief, how do you know this grief that you're writing about?
So it's interesting because a lot of people, I think that the main character, Allie, is me because I write it in first person, but Allie is the only character that has never really known grief. And I have known grief most of my life. My mother died by suicide when I was 17. And so that, kind of my whole young adult life was kind of figuring out that, grappling with and figuring out that grief and also trying to understand more about suicide. And then actually, as I was writing this book, you probably don't even know this. So I wrote the book for about 6 years. And as I was finishing, my father passed away in 2018. So went back in. Yeah. So I went back into the book with like this fresh, and when my dad died, unlike when my mom died, I was able to really just openly grieve him because it was a natural occurrence. It wasn't, with my mom, there was so many other.
Shocking. Right.
Exactly. And I was older and it was, and I went back into the book, and a lot of the kind of really raw grief passages were written after my dad died, like right in the kind of aftermath of that. So it was healing on so many levels.
Yeah, I'd love to talk more, and I think the girls have questions too about suicide is not really talked about as openly. And I mean, look, death isn't talked about very much either, but I feel like suicide is such a taboo subject for a lot of people. I would love to know what was your experience after your mom died? How were people handling you, but in a way, handling you and also in your own home, your dad,
especially at your age, and how they talked about it.
Well, so I made it real easy to handle me because I went into perfection mode. I lost weight, got perfect grades, dated the cutest boy in school. Like I made it so that it was almost like if nobody feels sorry for me, this terrible thing didn't happen. And then I went away to college, and college was like this like relief for me because I wasn't the person that this happened to, in a small town where everybody knew. And I was able to just kind of be young and free and have fun. And for 4 years, but it was after college when I started working and just like life just started, just normal life, that I went down hard. So I got into therapy, and which I've been in most of my life since. And I worked on the suicide hotlines for a couple of years. And it was a process of both grieving and also just trying to understand what had happened in my life. And that was all very helpful, but it was a lot. It took a long time.
I'm curious how someone at that age, and it's touched on in the book with some of the characters, how do you handle that sort of that second guessing, that, how did I not know? What could I have done? Kind of that guilt at that age. I can't even imagine how overwhelming that would have been.
I didn't, I mean, I'm sure I felt that at some point. I saw, so my mom had been, in retrospect, I'm pretty positive my mom was undiagnosed bipolar, which I would also say I think Feeney is, the character in the book. My mom was like very creative and so much fun, a lot like the Feeney character, but then she would sleep in the day or like forget to pick me up from school, or, there, like I saw things that even my dad didn't see. But I didn't know it wasn't normal. I was an only child. I had no reference. It's like now as a mother, I can look back and see things, differently, or just even as an adult. But my parents were always like, your life is perfect. Our marriage is perfect. Our family is perfect. That was kind of that's what I was being told, shown. And I had massive anxiety as a kid. And I think it's because I, on some level, knew that was not true and that things weren't great, but nobody was talking about it. And so it's like I can almost unpack things now in a different way, that it actually, it's almost a relief to be able to understand that, because like I'm not a massively anxious person. I had all these allergies. I had all this. It was a mess, and I think it had a lot to do with just the like dichotomy of my reality, and also like picking up on other things that was going on at the time. So it's almost it was a total shock, and yet there was also kind of this sense of like something had been brewing,
So how did your dad change, like, after that, or did he? Did he kinda just kind of glaze over it and just pretend it didn't happen, or?
No, I mean, my dad, he very quickly started dating like women not much older than me.
Oh, wow.
So, yeah. Yeah. So that was super weird, and not good. Again, why it was good for me to go away to college and, have my own life, because it was not great with him. Um, but he was also like emotionally available. Like he was not a shut down guy. Like we could talk about things. We could talk about my mom. He grieved. We grieved together. And he would talk about her. It wasn't like we never discussed her again. But our relationship kind of turned into more of like a pure relationship at that point, which I didn't want. I wanted a parent, but he just wasn't able to do that at that time, and eventually I got comfortable with that, and we, made our amends and had a really good relationship. And I also, something that is important in my book, and something that I think is important in life, is that when my dad died, I had said everything I needed to say to him, good and bad, I had told him when I thought he was an asshole, and I told him how much I loved him, and we made each other laugh, and we had a great time together. So like, that is so important to me, because, I obviously that didn't happen with my mother. And I've had other losses like that, where it's like, you didn't get to say those things. So I think that's so important.
Yeah, I think you said something in the book. You're basically saying when something terrible happens, it kind of gives you the reality of like, oh, wait, we don't have a lot of time. I mean, even Max saying like, fuck the waiting, fuck death. I want to know what you guys think about me right now. And we're going to get into that because I love what they decide to do. But, that's what I love about this book. And I think people who understand grief should read it because they'll see themselves in one of the characters or something that was going on. But people who don't have any real experience in it, but they will, or they're going to know someone, it really is kind of a book of lessons. And I know that obviously you title it, There Are No Rules for This. Was that your intention going in, that you were going to address that there aren't any rules, or did that come about after you started the writing process, or why this
No,
title?
that's interesting. The original title was This Thing Called Life. No, actually, I'm going to go back. My original title, because I thought it was so clever and everyone told me it was a terrible idea, was Week of the Living Dead.
Oh.
Which I was like, did it make so much sense? And everyone's like, everyone's going to think it's about zombies. I'm like, I know, that's what's funny. They're like, no, it's not funny. Only you think it's funny, JJ. So it was titled This Thing Called Life. And I actually had the Prince quote at the very beginning of the book. Dearly beloved, we're gathered here today to get through this thing called life, which I still love. I love that quote. I love that idea, that concept. But my publisher was like, this thing called life doesn't tell you much about what this book, like, there's not a lot of stakes in that title. And there's so many stakes in the book. And I feel like, she felt like we could do better. So they came back to me with a list of names, and one of them was something close to this. And then I think I tweaked it to There Are New Rules for This, which I do really like, because that's just true. That's kind of true in life, but very much, when somebody dies, it's like everything kind of goes off the table, right? You're just getting through it.
Right. Well, and I think even for us, we tell people constantly who are reaching out to us, they're wanting validation. That, is this feeling normal? Is this what I'm doing? This, is that normal? And we're like, yeah, it's all normal. Anything that you feel or do is normal. Nobody has a rule book for what you're supposed to be feeling or doing, or where you keep the ashes, or if you keep the ashes, or how long you stay in the house, or even the things that you feel on the inside. I know Lacey addresses, anger is something that nobody talks about. And you address it in the book as well, because when suicide is part of the issue, you're really angry that they made this choice. But as we realize through the book, and I'm sure with all of your research, it's not really a choice. I don't think they're not.
No, and I think for me, working on the hotlines was a huge eye opener and a help for me, because I was talking to people, for hours sometimes about, and they were even though they're calling a suicide hotline, they don't really want to die. They're just in such a place of pain that they literally can't think of another solution. And so sometimes they just need somebody to offer them other solutions, and they'll take them. They want other solutions. They don't want to do this thing, but it feels, I mean, yes, people say, oh, it's selfish. It's, why would somebody do that? And to me, it's almost like there's no self anymore in that moment. Like they don't even have a sense of self in that moment. And it is more of it's a relief of pain than anything else. And honestly, like that, I heard that over and over and over from people. And that was helpful, because it did take away some of that anger and guilt.
Was it cathartic for you to do that, to work in the suicide hotline?
Yes. And then it was very cathartic for me. It was also cathartic for me to write this book, which I did. This is not why I wrote the book, but having the perspective of a friend of a suicide versus a daughter is a very different thing. I think there's a lot more compassion in it. There's a lot less shame. There's still those feelings, but there's not the abandonment wound is not as large. And it was like I could see a different side of the whole thing, which was interesting. I didn't expect that.
Were the characters based on people you knew, or did you make them up, or were they compilations of people, or
your mom's friends?
I think all of that, yes. I think all of it, yes. And also, no, like it's, I had never written fiction. I'm a copywriter in marketing. That's my day job. And I'd never written fiction before this. And so I didn't know this to be true, but I do now, is that, like, I think every character has got a little bit of you and a little bit of everybody in it. And some maybe more so than others. I mean, but no, nothing is based on any one person.
Was your dad able to read some of this book before he passed away? Did he have an idea?
I don't think he did. No, that's actually interesting. I should ask my stepmom. He did eventually get remarried to a lovely, age-appropriate woman. I didn't have my contract before he passed, so he didn't know it was going to be published. But
oh yeah,
But I know he knows now.
He does know now. That's one thing that I love. I mean, so many things in this book that I love because it really does encompass all of the things that can happen when you're grieving. And one of the things that I did early on was look for signs because I believed that there was something else. And you had several
Penny
signs.
Loggins was one. I remember reading
Yes,
that. That was
several
funny. I
signs
love
in
that.
your book. Even, it was music. I loved that the moth came in and kind of showed Allie where the ashes were so that she could get them. And
The hotel room scene is hilarious.
Yeah.
I was dying
I was
laughing.
so nervous reading it. I'm like, somebody's going to walk in.
yeah, there's so many twists and turns in the book that have
The ashes everywhere.
And the
that you wouldn't
Ziplocs.
that you wouldn't assume would be part of it. And I love the friendships too. You did a very good job of relaying who these women were, who they were, but then who they were to each other and all their shenanigans.
I felt like we're a lot like those characters because we have a lot of us have dark sense of humor and we laugh at things that are probably wildly inappropriate to some people. But when I read this book, I thought they get it. Grief can bring out your fun. Sometimes it's funny.
Yeah.
I mean,
Well, and they've known each
strangely
other.
so.
Yeah. The three that, remain after Feeney's death, they've known each other for so long too, which I think that that is a different kind of friendship than, I mean, all friendships are wonderful in their own ways, but they've really know each other's pains and what they've been through, and they've like seen each other through a lot. So that helps, I think, when they lose Feeney.
Yeah.
My favorite, one of my favorite quotes that I kept going back to is when we were together, we built each other back up. I love that.
Yeah. Did
Yeah.
your mom have friendships like that? And did they rally around you after her death?
Yes, absolutely. She did. And she, my Aunt Janet, who I think in the acknowledgments, was not an aunt by blood. She was my mom's best friend. They met when they were teenagers. And she's still in my life. She's a wonderful, amazing human. And she was around from the start, and a couple other friends of my mom's. And they very much had, and like I said, Feeney isn't my mom, but my mom did have like a penchant for phallic squashes. And these were her friends that she would do some of these funny things with. So yes, she did have, which was
yeah. I mean, were any of the stories based on real life? Like, so you mentioned the phallic squash.
So here's the funny thing: when these characters showed up for me, when I started writing, they showed up fully formed in a way. I mean, like I said, I've never written fiction before. I don't know if that's how it happens all the time. They were kind of like, here I am, and I would kind of put them in these situations and then let them go. I didn't have like, I don't outline. I would, so, and sometimes I'd be like, okay, I need to do a flashback. What's going to happen? And I called one of my friends in LA and said, okay, if you were thrown in jail, what would it be for? And she's like, well, there's this van that parks in my neighborhood.
That's funny.
Dude,
love that
I've seen that van in LA. I used to live in LA. I know that van.
That was a real thing?
Yes.
Oh my
Yeah.
gosh.
She didn't vandalize it, but she's
Right.
like, I've thought about it. So some things, but sometimes I would just be like, okay, here's what they're going to do. And I'm just let them kind of go. And they would tell me what was going to happen.
Let's talk about their idea. So basically, these three women are thrown for a total loop. They were not expecting this suicide at all. And I also want to recognize we don't say committed suicide anymore. The proper term is now what?
Died by suicide.
Died by suicide.
And by the way, this was an education for me. I think my back cover jacket says committed because I didn't know this at the time either. But yes, I've learned it's died by suicide, or I've even heard people say died as from symptoms of depression.
I love that because that word committed does make it seem like they did something wrong. Yeah, a crime. I love that.
I learned it from the article that you wrote. There was an article that you wrote about it. That was the first time I'd ever heard that. So it really changed the way I think and what I say.
I'm also starting to see, I've seen a couple obituaries so for the longest time, if I would read an obituary that didn't have a cause of death, especially if the person was on the younger side, I was always like, well, I know what happened. Because that's how we handle it, right? In this culture. And now I've seen a couple where it right off the bat, like died, by symptoms of depression or died by suicide, and then goes on to list all the amazing things about this person's life. And it's to me, it's almost like a relief. It's like, okay, I can understand, I can read about this amazing person and not be constantly like, well, what happened? What happened?
Right.
Yeah.
Well, and it's not, it shouldn't be secret. And that's one of the things that I think you kind of relay in the book is let's talk about the things that are bothering us and like the childhood that you had where everyone's pretending it's perfect. That's not real. Social media, everybody pretends like it's perfect a lot of the times. That's not real. And let's just be real and talk about things openly. And maybe we wouldn't have so much mental illness or suicide because people feel like they can actually admit what they're feeling.
Absolutely. And what I learned firsthand on the hotlines is talking about it talking about your how you're feeling is really the only thing that is proven to work. Like medicine doesn't always work. There's not an actual answer other than when you talk about it, it's almost like a release valve. You need to talk about it to like relieve the anxiety around it.
Right.
How have you, like after working on the hotlines and with your own children, like conversations with them, how do you deal with that?
They didn't know how they've always known that my mom had died when I was young, but they didn't know how until until they were a little bit older. And, I've just always been very open about it. I've talked about it. They know they've both read the book. They know about my work on the hotlines. That said, I'm going to tell you, I think when you've lost somebody by suicide, I'm always afraid that somebody else is going to, it becomes a reality that seems like it could happen at any minute when it's happened to you. So I'm always kind of, that is an anxiety that I will probably carry for the rest of my life. But I'm just very much.
Was your father able to talk about it? There's shame in the community? Like, was he embarrassed?
It was amazing. Like he was actually for, a man of his generation. He was able to talk about it. He did therapy. He was an optometrist in like a small town. So like he knew everybody. Everybody knew him and he was pretty beloved. So he did have good support and he was able to talk about it and he didn't, shove it down or anything like that.
Yeah.
So did he also talk to you about your mother's highs and lows? And did he ever feel like maybe she needed more help or at the lows?
Interestingly, his mother had been mentally ill. And so he was able to talk about it after she died, yes. But when she was alive, it would make him mad when she was not doing well. Because I think it reminded him of his own mother.
Sure.
And so he wasn't sorry, Dad. I know he wasn't a great partner to her in those moments. But after she died, he was able to talk about it pretty openly.
That's good. Yeah, I in the book I see you write in there. Let me see if I can get the actual quote. It was when you're talking about what as Allie, and I kind of heard your voice, but you were like, how would I handle this if my world was turned upside down? How would this change me? And I thought it was very interesting because it actually happened to you. And I was curious, what would you say to that question as JJ?
Well, unfortunately, I know how it would change me.
Right.
But that was kind of Allie in the moment being like she had been so wrapped up in her own grief and her own response that she hadn't fully understood what it would be like for Feeney's daughters. And in that moment, she kind of had that glimpse of what that might feel like. And it made her really angry. And, which I think is fair. And there is the moment where the daughter, Caroline, looks at Allie and says, I'm always going to be the person whose mom killed herself.
Mhm.
I absolutely felt that way for longest time. And I mean, literally until adulthood. And I have an amazing therapist. I said to her, I don't want to be the person that this happened to. And she looked at me and she said, but you are.
Mhm.
And it was like this, it was the simplest thing, but it's this moment where like the person, like my like young self and my adult self kind of like fused itself together. And I could be both things. I could be
Mhm.
the thing that the person that this happened to, and I could also be JJ that has a lot of other things about her that is not that. But
How
that
did
was like
it
in my
change you?
30s. How did
How
which
did your
the
mom's suicide change you?
And maybe how you parent differently or as a
yeah,
result of what happened.
I think I let a lot of shit go.
Mhm.
Um, and I think I'm a pretty strong person, and I think I have a really good sense of what's important and what's not. And I'm really grateful for that. I was listening to you guys talk about the Anderson Cooper
Mhm.
podcast. And I remember I listened to that too. And it was like, there is gratitude and grief. You know, I have a view on the world that I wouldn't have asked for, but I'm so glad I have it. Um, and I value people, and I also don't put up with people.
Right.
um, in a very different way, I think, because this has been my most of my life has been, post grief or post loss.
Right.
And I think about who I was before, and I didn't have the same kind of handle on things that I feel like I've had to have
Right.
post my mom's death.
It's interesting. We're going to release an episode where our children are talking and they are asked something similar, and I think that the consensus was we're not happy that this happened to us, that our dads died, but we like who we are. And we wouldn't
Yeah.
be who we are without part of that story, without that being in our. So, I just got chills.
Absolutely.
So it
Yeah.
really,
I know.
My
yeah,
whole life, I feel like people have been telling me that I'm strong, and it never. It's like that doesn't feel like the right word. It's almost like I've been forged,
right.
and that's where
I
strength
love
comes from.
Yeah,
I
It's
don't.
not by choice.
I
we
like-
all feel a little forged over here.
Yeah, exactly.
From what we've been through as well.
All right, so let's get back to one of the favorite things about this book is how they take their own hands. So they decide as a collective group that they to funerals now while they're alive. And so can you talk a little bit about how you went there and what the process was when you were thinking about each character's funeral?
Yeah. So the idea for the book came again, like the character is pretty fully formed. It was like 4 women, one dies by suicide. The rest of them have their own funerals while they're still alive. That's all I really kind of knew when I started writing it. But I loved that each of them came away from that feeling like think about Max, her struggles with her mental health was something that her friends valued about her
Mhm.
and thought of as like a superpower, and she'd
Mhm.
always thought of it as a flaw. So it's like they had this sense of themselves that was different afterwards, which you know isn't it such a tragedy that most people don't hear from because they're
Right.
gone when everyone stands up and talks about them.
Right.
Yeah.
Actually learn about themselves through that process. And they don't always get the chance. So most people don't get the chance. And I really do, maybe because I've had loss for most of my life, I really do try to say the things I want to say. And, I don't want to leave things unsaid. What is the point?
Right, exactly. And I try to do it on people's birthdays, but I need to do it, more often, but
I think
telling
birthdays
them.
are kind of,
Yeah.
it's a bit of a memorial, right?
Yeah, exactly. And share a funny story or,
But we wouldn't maybe go as deep. Like we wouldn't be like, hey, you really struggle with, your marriage. And
Right.
this is where I think it's really powerful.
Not on my Facebook post. Listen, I know.
Yeah.
You
Whitney, your birthday's coming up.
That's true.
So-
Oh, that's
So I
funny.
think, but you can say that. You can say, I watched you do these things and battle these demons or deal with these stresses in your life, and I'm I'm moved by it. I'm changed by your struggles
Mm-hmm.
and how you manage them.
And
Yeah.
we've talked on the show about, sudden death versus a long illness. And we've had guests on here who have had opportunities throughout, from the diagnosis till the person passes away to say those things, to have those moments, to have the family, write letters and talk to the person and tell them how they feel. And it's just a completely different situation when the person dies suddenly and it's not something that you're prepared for and you don't have that opportunity to say. And we've all talked about that a lot, how, if we could just have 5 minutes with our spouse to say a few things that we didn't get to toward the end. But
That's actually interesting. I almost wonder if that would be an interesting exercise to do. Like, what would you, if you, it's like, what would you say? But write it down, or have that be an interesting thing for you guys for any of us to think about, right? Like, what would those 5 minutes look like? What would we say? How would we spend them?
It would almost be overwhelming, especially since it's been 12 years for me. I think so much has happened. Do you ever think about that? Because it's been a while for you as well, that so much has happened since your mom's death, that where would you start to would they know you now? I mean, because what happened to you and everything subsequently after that has changed who you are. I think about that all the time. Like, what would I say? What would I be like if he came back just for a period of time? Would I even know him either? It's weird.
What we probably just say is, I love you and I'm grateful for you, and that's probably all you would need to say. But I hadn't thought about that. That's interesting.
But that's where the signs come in, because when you get a sign from your loved one, that's them saying, hey, I haven't gone anywhere. I'm seeing this. I'm here with you. It's different, but I'm not gone. I'm just somewhere else.
So ever since my dad died, I had a dream where it was absolutely a visitation. I know it was, because he kind of came and he said, I want you to know that I see you for who you are. All of his friends would always come to me and say, your dad is so proud of you. He loves you so much. Because he would talk about me during, when he would see his patients and stuff, but he never would tell me. And I was always, that always made me mad. He could tell me. Instead, he was kind of critical. So, he said, I see you, JJ, in the dream. And ever since that dream, I see JJ in license plates all the time.
Oh, wow.
I love
I'm talking multiple times a week.
Wow.
All the time.
wow,
License plates. My dad liked license plates for some reason. I don't.
that's so cool.
Anyway, I get them all the time, and I believe in them, and I ask for more, and I say thank you, and I get them. And actually, we moved into a house a year ago, and just this summer, as I was promoting the book, a white moth flew into my bathroom.
Oh my God.
And landed. I know. I've never seen. I made the white moth up. I've never seen a white moth. I don't know. And it came into my bathroom.
Well,
Now they're coming for you.
That's even on the way over here, and I texted it to you real quick, JJ.
Yes.
But I get in the car to come to the studio, and Kenny Loggins is on
No
the radio.
way.
No way.
Yes, is
No
that
way. That's
crazy?
funny.
So
That's
I immediately took a
I-
picture and sent it to JJ. I was like, "Look
I
who's in the
love
car
that.
with
No
me."
way.
So let's
And
talk about Kenny Loggins. Yeah.
Oh yeah, I was just gonna say I went to his concert in October, I think, and he played a 9-minute version of "Celebrate."
Oh,
All right. So
I have it video.
So for the audience listening, that if they haven't read the book yet, Kenny Loggins plays a little role in this story, and I love how he was weaved in. Was that, I'm assuming, just kind of came to you one day? That wasn't in your original plan,
That was
Kenny.
not my original friend. Nope,
But you
I don't know
actually are a fan of Kenny Loggins.
I am a fan, but if it was me, if I was going to muscle a singer into my book, it would be John Bon Jovi, because I've been in love with him.
But for some reason,
really,
yeah.
So Kenny isn't my personal fave. I've always loved his music, but it just Feeney, all of a sudden that she loves Kenny Loggins, and so Kenny Loggins is in my book.
One of the things that really resonated with me, Allie, obviously, she's the narrator of the book. So I feel like I know her the best because you're in her head with her. But I was so for lack of a better word, happy to see how the grief went into her marriage, because Allie got she did not want her husband's comfort. She didn't want his attention. And it resonated with me.
Yeah, it's been controversial. I've gone to lots of book clubs or events and people are like, hated her for that. In that moment, she's doing that bargaining with God, like kind of like, can I have my friend back and can you go away now? Cause and he's trying so hard and she can't accept it in that moment. She's too vulnerable and she's too raw and she's angry at him for no reason at all other than that he's alive. And I think that we all do have these kind of reactions. You don't know how you're going to react when you're put in this situation.
Well, it's sometimes we're angry at our husbands. I don't know about you, but I have been, and that's not logical. He didn't want to die, so that's not logical at all. But it's how you feel.
It's how you feel.
Yeah.
You have to process it. You have to go through it.
Right. There was the scene that made me laugh so much was when one of the characters was having to comfort one of the people that were attending the funeral, and they were calling them the looky-loos. And she was comforting someone that she's like, didn't even like her at all.
Yeah.
And I got tickled because I remember when I was at my husband's funeral, someone was there and I was like, they don't even acknowledge my presence, and still don't, but they were there. And I thought, what an odd thing.
Some people take grief as like a chance to like perform, right? I mean, I think they do. I think there's people out there like that. They're like, I'm going to be the one that shows up and does this and that. And it has nothing to do with the person who died or the person who's left. It's like more about that person.
In your case, because you were only 17, some people may have been looky-loos and wondering, like, how will she respond? Like, what does that look like? I kind of felt like people were wondering, what does a young widow look like? Because they haven't experienced it before.
I had someone come up to me at my mom's, like the memorial service after the funeral to tell me about everybody that they know that had died by suicide. I remember sitting there like, what is happening?
We haven't.
Am I supposed to comfort you? And why are you telling me this? People are so weird.
Like, I'm worried that I've been gross in the past before it happened to me. I'm worried I said something trite and stupid.
I'm sure we did. Because we're gross too. But I think once you've been through something,
I'm not saying you're gross, but I might be.
No, I'm sure we've all had our gross moments. But it's like, I think when you're on the other side, you have just a better knowledge of how to handle those situations.
Oh, we hope so. Anyway.
Well, and I love you handle the grief in such a great way, and you've got so many different layers of how, because there are no rules for this, you show so many different perspectives of it, and I love it. And I love very early on, you're talking about how people rush to normal. And I love this. It's on page 17. You said, but Feeney met Liddy right where she was and didn't try to fix the pain. She received it, held it, and resounded in the only way that was honest by reminding Liddy of our permanence in her life. That was so powerful. You can't fix it.
Mm-mm. No, and trying is what makes us gross, right? It's the trying to fix that is gross. It's like not for the person in the pain. There's nothing you can do just but witness it and walk through it with them. Right.
I have someone in my life that I won't mention, but who often does it could be worse kind of scenario. And I think they think they're trying to make it better, because they care about me, but it's like, well, at least you didn't have this happen and that happened because I know this person that this happened to, and that's worse than what happened to you. And I don't know if it's like they're trying to make themselves feel better, but it definitely doesn't make me feel any better because I just need someone to acknowledge, like, this really awful thing happened to you and your family. I mean, you were like taken out on the road by a drunk driver, and I just need the acknowledgement.
Yeah, and on the flip side of that, are people who I let my friends, like when we were in high school, I think they wouldn't want to bring their problems to me because they're like, well, her problems are so much worse.
Yeah,
and that is also alienating, right? Like you want to know whatever other people are going through because everybody's pain is their pain to them, and everybody's pain scale is as high as it is for them, right? So that was hard for me too because I would sometimes feel like I wasn't hearing the real story from some people.
And it's just like this hierarchy of problems, right? And I learned after our accident, that sometimes people would come to me and they were complaining about something that seemed trivial, like, I think I've mentioned this before. Maybe the tile for their kitchen renovation was on back order and it was holding up, and that I'm, months out of losing my husband. And I tried to just I still do. I try to remind myself, it's all relative. Like this is what they're dealing with now, and you can't compare and you can't try to one up. It just is where everybody is, and it is it's whatever they're dealing with. And you want people to come to you with their backorder tile issues or problems in their marriage, like maybe not wanting to talk to you about problems in their marriage because your husband's dead, but you want your friend to come and talk to you about that.
Yeah. And there's going to be a moment where it's flipped and their pain's worse than yours. And like, that's okay. That's just the way it goes. Right. And that's friendship and that's life.
Or more acute. Like 12 years in, I'm in a much better place than I would have been a couple of years in. Now people can tell me pretty much anything and I don't feel like I have to minimize their pain because mine was this or, whatever.
Yeah.
I wanted to ask you about the journal.
Controversial.
I was thinking, because I always have kept notes for years. And I don't really call it a journal or anything. I just keep notes and I put them all on my phone. They're in a section. And I was thinking, oh my goodness, if someone got a hold of that. I even thought about, after reading this, I even thought maybe I should go erase a few lines because I've said some things that people might be like horrified that I said or thought.
We'll get an X-Acto knife.
So I was thinking her friends like took her journal and were like going through it. And I'm thinking, I don't know about that.
I know.
I'd be horrified.
So
I want to read it.
There was Feeney's voice was missing for so much of the book, other than the flashbacks. And so the idea kind of came to me and I'm like, I'm going to play with this idea. And, and yes, it's controversial and they don't make the decision lightly. And I think in the end, they feel like they're being protective of her, and wanting to be able to share what they can with her daughters.
Like I was thinking about her kids, if they knew, like, because she sounded outrageous in a lot of ways. She would do all these outrageous things. And in a way, I think she'd be a lot of fun to hang out with. But your child may not want to know some of those things.
Right. And she, that was kind of her only form of therapy. I think she just was not raised in a family where you talked about these things. And she even didn't really want to talk about it with her closest friends. And so her journal is kind of her way of getting some of those things out that she wasn't able to talk about. Also, I will say that when my mom died, there was a journal in her closet and all the pages were ripped out.
Oh, who did that, do you think?
She did.
Her.
Oh, she did.
Mm-hmm.
Interesting. See, that makes me sad because I was excited for the friends when they found the journal because and they were wanting to know, could we have done anything different? Were there signs? What could, they were trying to make sense of something.
And stopped this.
I felt like it was therapeutic for them.
And I think they started to see her in a different way. Like she was kind of the bright, shiny object. They'd all known each other for a long time and she came in later and she was just such a force of personality. And I think they were all a little bit dazzled by her and maybe a little bit like platonically in love with her. And they let her get away with saying she was fine.
Right. Yep. When Liddy says, I guess sometimes you need to die in order to wake the fuck up, I think that is it resonates with me so much because I feel like I woke up when my husband died. And I feel like if people could just get this book, they would not have to deal with the death or the trauma, but they could live it through these characters and maybe wake up. Like, let's all fucking wake up.
She was like, Liddy just realized, why am I putting up with a bad marriage if this is my life? Like this is the life I have to lead. I actually listened to a podcast recently where they was talking about, they were talking about how like we spend like 25 years of our life sleeping, and then we spend like 3 years of our life eating, and we spend
That's
a year of our
flipped.
life waiting in lines. I mean, like, and
Yeah.
it was, and what basically the number ended up to be like, took you to about 50 of just stuff, just doing shit.
Right.
And so then it's like, so you better be doing that boring shit with people you love. Like, do not
True.
be doing people that you don't love, because that's just the boring stuff. And then really make sure you're doing stuff you love in these other years. Like, we really don't have that much time.
Mm-mm.
So cut people out of your life that aren't serving you, and do the things that bring you joy.
At the end of the book, you say, if there's anything we need to take away from Feeney's death, it's don't keep in the hard stuff. And I love that. If there's anything that we can take away from today, don't keep it in. Everyone's got it. Everyone's got it. And obviously, if you or someone you know is struggling or in crisis, help is available. You say you can call or text 988. I did not even know that it was that simple. So everybody has a phone.
It's like a 911 now. That's I think maybe been about 10 years ago or something. That was a law that was passed, which is amazing.
Yeah, that is incredible. So 988, if you need some help to talk with someone, when you're going through something that's really difficult. And we all do. We all do.
And a shout out to the people like you volunteering on those hotlines and being the voice on the other side.
That's got to be
Puts
hard.
in the time.
And there are people, I mean, what you should call because you need the help. And there's people literally sitting in a chair waiting for those calls. So call them. Like, there's no reason.
Yeah, you're not bothering them. They're there waiting for you.
That's amazing.
Yep. All right. Out of the 4 ladies, who are you most like? Max, Allie, Feeny, or Liddy?
She meant us, and I was like, "What?"
She's like, "I just met y'all." I don't know.
I don't think I can say it, only because I think that there's pieces of me in all of them. I don't know. So sorry that I don't have an answer for that. I can tell you that I know my dog breed.
Oh, okay, great. Tell us your dog.
I'm a French bulldog. And I have one, and I can tell because she's
quirky.
Oh, hilarious. And she's so stubborn. And I'm like, oh my God, you're me and a dog.
I have one last question. Do you go starfishing in real life?
I never called it that, and I don't really, that came out of the blue, like so much of this book did. But I do love to like lay in the grass and look at the sky. I do. That's just something I have done in like my life, but I wouldn't say I called it that. And I'm not always at night, but maybe I need to start.
Yeah.
Maybe we all need to start.
I think I need to also. I love that.
I loved it too. Let's all go starfish after this.
Yeah.
All right.
In the rain.
Oh yeah, it's raining. JJ Elliott, her book is There Are No Rules for This. Honestly, you guys, it's so easy. I read it in 3 days. It's funny. It's heartfelt. You'll cry. You'll laugh. You'll want to go starfishing. Thank you so much, JJ, for spending some time with us.
Thank you,
JJ.
Bye.
Bye. Thank you.
Thank you.